Welcome to Healthcare Shapers Perspectives, where we bring you the insights from the experts shaping healthcare today. Hosted by Diane Bryson of Inspired Health Strategies.
Welcome back to the Healthcare Shapers podcast series. I'm Diane Bryson, and I'm here with Craig DeLarge, and I'm going to read his bio just so I make sure I get it right.
Okay.
Craig is a digital healthcare strategist and mental health advocate at the Digital Mental Health Project, where he produces education programs and research which help improve the adoption of digital technology in the mental and behavioral health spaces. Craig, tell us what that means. Introduce yourself.
Yeah. So once again, Craig DeLarge. I'm a digital health strategist and a mental health advocate and educator who spent a number of years working in the digital health space as an entrepreneur in the pharma industry. And along that life course, also had a mental health tragedy within my family that thrust me into the advocacy and education space. I've done a lot of work over the years with the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so about 7 years ago, bringing my vocational and occupational interests together, vocational mental health, occupational digital health, I formed a consultancy, the Digital Mental Health Project, where I develop research and education for founders, funders, implementers, and caregivers and those that suffer with mental illness. The consultancy really is about helping to elicit a faster and responsible adoption of digital technology in the mental and behavioral spaces, whether we're talking about wellness or whether we're talking about illness. And so what we see in the current situation in our society is unfortunately a growing burden of illness around mental health, whether we're talking about depression and anxiety or bipolar disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, all the way up to psychosis, and unfortunately for too many, suicide. And so while we hear a lot in the press about how the digital devices that we use every day are being used unskillfully in ways that actually damage our health and our relationships, the work that I'm doing within this consultancy is really about helping us to see the other side of that equation and really helping all of us who, frankly, because we're human, we're susceptible to mental illness as much as we're susceptible to physical illness, frankly. The question becomes, how can we use these tools that we carry around every day as a support to our personal resilience, to our mental, emotional, and psychological wellness, helping us to avoid illness? And should we find ourselves in situations where we are distressed, disordered, or disabled by illness, how do we actually use these tools to recover? So that's the overview, how what got me to this point and the work that I do.
So I'm going to come back to this. I know COVID has had an impact because it's had an impact on me. We hear about that. Yeah. But I want to go back to how you got started. Tell me about your personal story.
So my personal story is one where a very dear loved one of mine in their late adolescence had a bout of depression that then we thought it was depression or perhaps bipolar, but it was ultimately diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenia.
Wow.
And here, 17 years later, this loved one of mine continues to struggle with this condition into their late 30s. And what's happened is, as a family, we got ourselves educated about it, again, largely through the help of the National Alliance on Mental Illness, their family-to-family education program. And even to this day, 17 years later, remain part of a community of families who grapple continually with the challenges as well as the deficiencies in the mental health system that we have here in the society. And then, of course, I have to admit that the work that I've done in the pharma industry has certainly given me the opportunity to work on brands for people who are mentally ill. And so, It is as life has kind of brought about this constellation of circumstances that have really turned this space and how digital technology impacts it into my life passion and work.
Which is a gift, really. Not many people get a chance to know what that feels like.
Yeah, I like the analogy that life gives you lemons, you make lemonade, and you make enough lemonade to serve others. Yeah.
Doing what you are passionate about. What a gift.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, tell us about what digital health really means.
Yeah.
You talked about the devices and how we use them and how they could possibly help. Can you tell us what your definition is?
Sure.
And probably briefly, because I know you have so much else to say. I want to hear.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll certainly be succinct. So digital health generally is that space where we see digital technologies of various types, whether we're talking about devices, sensors, communications channels, data and algorithms. When these technologies are brought to bear in a way that they are used to improve access to healthcare, diagnosis of health, treatment, and then helping people to recover or heal and to stay well. We see lots of applications, and this intersection between healthcare delivery and treatment and digital technology is digital health generally. Now, when we take that and apply that specifically to the delivery of services and therapies that specifically relate to mental health, whether we're talking about meditation and relaxation or cognitive behavioral therapies or psychotherapy, or there's this area we call passive remote sensing or digital phenotyping, where we actually can use sensors to understand changes in our physical manifestations that actually are a signal of imbalances in our mental, emotional, and psychological state. This is now the area that we call digital mental health.
So can you give me an example of that? Because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I sure can. So, here in the last year, the area of teletherapy has gotten really popular because people have not been able to go to offices, but yet people have been more distressed and lonely and isolated. And it certainly helps that in the last year, the government has begun to reimburse more for a capacity for a psychologist, psychiatrist, or therapist to be able to meet with their clients by video conferencing. The platforms used are typically HIPAA compliant so that there's a high degree of security and privacy around data. But what's happened is that the technology has made the process of seeing a therapist much more convenient. People don't have to leave their houses. They don't have to travel to an office. They can be more anonymous as we talk about stigma, and actually get help in ways where they don't have to disclose as much, publicly at least. Other examples we've seen of this are mobile apps like Calm and Headspace that actually teach people how to relax and how to meditate, sometimes with an instructor, but most often without an instructor. Other examples that we see in this space, the use of virtual reality. So Facebook Oculus has become really popular in the last year. It's reached a price point where it's actually less than an iPhone now. Well, we see lots of applications within that technology. On the consumer side, we see lots of meditation and relaxation sorts of applications. But understand in the clinic, for many years now, the Veterans Administration and any number of academic centers around the world, a lot of this work going on at University of Southern California actually, have been using virtual reality as an administrator of exposure therapy, which is
Of what kind of therapy? I'm sorry?
what we call exposure therapy,
Okay.
which is a highly evidence-based remedy for post-traumatic stress disorder. Because what you do is you take the person And using virtual reality, you put them back into the situation where they were traumatized, giving them the ability to repeatedly reprocess that situation, but also being able to pull them out if they become overwhelmed in ways that they actually experience greater healing with higher access and much lower cost of delivery of the therapy. So these are just a few examples. Yep.
So with that exposure therapy, do people respond because they get used to being under that stress?
Exactly.
No kidding, because of that exposure.
Exactly.
Yes. And so it doesn't become the burden. Oh, interesting.
Yes. Yes. Yep. With dementia, bridging over from post-traumatic stress disorder, in the dementia area, we have reminiscence therapy. And so virtual reality is being used for that also. And that's where you give someone a virtual scenario that comforts them because it's a memory of a past time in their lives, right? So we're seeing a lot of really interesting applications in the mental health, behavioral health space, bridging a bit over even into neuroscience, where the technology is being used to improve cost of delivery, convenience, and breadth of access, and even improving quality. And there's a growing evidence base for these therapies, which is why you see more reimbursement of it in the healthcare system.
That's good. And in the US healthcare system, because other places in the world, are they more apt to reimburse?
Well, actually, you see that countries like Canada, United Kingdom, and Australia are actually more progressed in this area than the United States, actually. Yeah.
I want to go back to something that you had mentioned that I didn't capture fully, but I'd like to learn more about the passive. It had to do
passive remote sensing.
Yes.
Yeah. So the fact is that in all of the digital devices we use, largely smartphones, there are all kinds of sensors in there that are actually learning and capturing more about us than we know about ourselves. So, some of the basic sensors are GPS location, language patterns, which are expressed not only in our voice, but in our keystrokes. Sleeping patterns can be detected, and then movement. And so taking data of this type, you can triangulate that data and use it to get a sense of what a person's emotional and psychological state is. I mean, we know that there are certain language patterns that are correlated with depression and suicide. We know that if we see someone who sits in their bedroom for 5 days straight and don't leave the house, that may very well be a signal triangulated with other factors that they're depressed. We know that if a person is constantly moving and we don't see sleep for multiple days on end, that's another indicator of a decline. Exactly. Yes.
Interesting. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay. So this is all fascinating to me, very much, and I'm sure it is to our audience. What's your vision for your work as the world has expanded, at least in the U.S. and finally in the U.S., but elsewhere probably? What is your vision? Where do you think we can go?
Yeah. So I think that there are there are a few pillars, I would say, to the vision that I see in doing this work. So, we have a generation of digital natives for whom the use of digital technology is a permanent fixture of their lives. They use it more volume-wise and more skillfully as an integrated life function than any of us do, who we call digital immigrants. That's you and I, right?
It is.
and so, they're using it so much for commerce and entertainment. Why not educate and create a level of literacy where they actually use it as fluidly to relax, to exercise, to eat well, to have a good relationship that preserves their mental health, as they use it to, listen to music and shop on Amazon. Mine is a vision where the digital device that we use every day actually becomes our mental health assistant to keep us well and to help us recover, not just ourselves, but our loved ones, our communities, and the society. And by the way, the further vision is that that happens in a way that we have confidence in the security and the privacy of our data, that we have access to psychoeducation, and that level of psychoeducational literacy becomes so prevalent that we begin to see a decline in stigma. I think we're seeing that in some parts of the society already, decline in stigma and discrimination that make people more comfortable in reaching out when they're distressed, getting the help they need. And over time, what we hope to see with this, heightened digital literacy, heightened psychoeducational literacy, decline in stigma and discrimination, increases in access, whether that's mediated by a doctor, by a peer, or just something that someone does for themselves, that we actually see a moderation, if not a decline, in the levels of mental distress, disorder, and disability in the society.
So we talked about a lot of things in the pre-interview, so thank you for taking the time to do that, because that helped to inform me.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing we didn't talk about, but I know that you're passionate about, is equity in this space, because I see you posting about it all the time. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to us about that? Talk to us about it.
Yeah. So, we have a mental health system that, like most systems in our society, that cater to those who have money. And this is the equity issue, is that wealth is health in our society. There are other societies where it's understood that, health is health, not wealth. And so we're talking about devices that are ubiquitous. Pretty much everyone's got a smartphone. And so there is a huge opportunity to create improved equity in the delivery of good mental health therapy and services through these devices. But it just has to be a matter that we develop the tools that work through these devices in a manner that people are knowledgeable that they're there, they trust what's there, and they're socialized and confident in using it. There's a further huge opportunity from an equity perspective to make sure that we customize the tools that we create in a way that they meet the particular cultural values, practices, and preferences of the various different populations that make up our society. Right now, we by and large have an environment where if you have money, you can get good therapy and services. If you happen to be Western, modern, and scientific in your orientation, then the therapies that are presented fit your worldview. That's not even the majority of the population on the planet, though, right? But yet, I don't know if we've quite. I think we have reached a tipping point where better than 50% of the world's population has a digital device, right?
Wow.
So with that in hand, right? If not on head, increasingly it'll be on skin, right? Mm-hmm. Why not take advantage of those tools that have been funded and socialized to make us better workers and shoppers, to also make us healthier citizens and human beings?
Okay.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I see our time is running out. Is there anything else I haven't asked you that you really want to close out with, the final message that you want to have?
Yeah. So, these digital tools we have are just that, tools. And we hear so much about the harm that they do. I like to leave people with the analogy that it's just a hammer. I can take a hammer and I can break a window, or I can build a house. We're breaking a lot of windows with these digital devices we have right now. The goal of the work that I'm doing is helping us to be more skillful so we actually use those tools to build the house of our health rather than breaking the window of our health. So, I think that we all need to be working on figuring out for ourselves and for our children how we can actually learn how to use digital health just for that, for better health, where we're not doing such a good job of that right now, but there's a lot of potential for us to get better.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Yes.
So I'm going to sign off, but before I do, please let us know how we can contact you.
So I can be contacted at craig@wiseworking.com. Feel free to also give me a call, 267-367-9867. And if you read Medium, you'll find just search for the Digital Mental Health Project on Medium, and you'll find me there also.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much for
All
being
right. Thanks a lot, Diane.
We really appreciate your participating. And this is Diane Bryson signing off with Craig DeLarge.
All righty. Be well, everyone. Take care now.
Thank you for watching Healthcare Shapers Perspectives, where we bring you the insights from the experts shaping healthcare today. For more episodes, visit healthcareshapers.com/perspectives.